Today we're going to work on the elegant hand. What you're going to need is your pamphlet handout. You're going to want pages 5 and 6 from your homework, as well as your profile hands that you've already drawn and a clean piece of paper. So far in this series, you've learned to do the hand basic layout formula, and then we moved on to do the flat hand view, a profile view, and then we were working on a closing hand and the grasping hand view. And now we're going to work on what I'm calling the elegant hand. And basically what this is it's similar to the closing hand, but instead it's just your fingers dropping down instead of the whole hand. This hand gesture is something that you're going to see quite often on the runways, and you're probably going to draw this one the most often. You can see here I've used it on a profile view, the walking view, and then this is a posed view. Some other variations of this would be something like that, as well as something like this. So again, you're going to see this a lot when you look at models on the runways. It's a great hand pose to know, and especially for first semester, this is one that you're going to really want to get good at so you can use it all the time and be really confident in this gesture. So inside of your hands pamphlet, go ahead and turn to pages 21 and 22 so we can start on the elegant hand. And you can see that the first step is we're tracing off the profile view and we're getting our wrist width inside of the middle of the hand. Again, I have my profile hands from the previous demo, and I also have a clean piece of paper behind this because my table is dark and I want this to be really white so it's very see-through when I put a clean piece of paper on top. So go ahead and do this now. What you want to do is you want to start by tracing off the guidelines nice and clean and perfectly, and then lightly draw in the profile hands. So what I've done here is I've traced off my profile hands, but I don't need all the letters and information and fingernails from this. I just need the basic hand layouts because we're about to completely change this anyways. Another thing that I'm doing is I'm noticing that my hands, the fingers and stuff, they're starting to look a little bit thick and masculine, and I want them to get a little more thinned out and feminine looking. So in here I've trimmed away a little bit from like my pointer fingers and a little bit on my thumbs as well. And what we'll do in this demo is I'm going to show you a way to make these thumbs look even more relaxed because your hand doesn't need to be as wide open as you have right here on the profile view. So make sure you lightly trace off the new smaller wrist width from your profile hand, split it in half, and draw a line all the way through the middle of these fingers. Then where this line intersects with arc A, we're going to circle that point and call it B, and this will be your pivot point B. We also want to take our wrist width from the profile hand and move that out here to the middle of the hand at arch A, starting from the top of the guideline. So get your pencils nice and sharp, and what we'll do is we're going to just focus on her left hand for now. Now the first thing we want to do is, this was the original wrist width, which is what you use to develop the formulas for the layout. And then once we moved into the profile view, remember the wrist gets more narrow. So go ahead and draw in that new wrist width and shade it in so you remember that's the one that you want. And again, we want to divide this in half, so go ahead and take your best guess and then measure that, make sure you're correct. Once you have that split in half, we're going to go all the way through the center of the fingers here, looking at the middle finger. Connect that with a straight line. And again, where this line crosses arch A, we're going to have this pivot point that we're calling pivot point B. And then we also want to take this profile wrist width and make sure it's here, touching the top at arch A. And this will help us to determine how wide to make her hand in that area. The next thing we want to do is we want to make the middle finger drop down. So we're going to come along this guideline C, and we're going to put a dot on there and label it C, and we're going to have a straight line that connects back to pivot point B. Now that we've established our pivot point, what we want to do is we want to leave the pointer finger where it is and drop down the middle finger by itself. So here along this arc C, we know that the middle finger will touch that arc the whole way. So go ahead and come down a distance here to about the center of the hand. And then we'll do a straight line back to that pivot point, and we'll label this C. Then what we want to do is we want to find the width of the middle finger and evenly spaced on both sides of guideline C. And then we're going to connect this all the way back to the top knuckle at arch A. And we're going to label that D all through here. Now what we want to do is we want to have the width of the middle finger evenly spaced on both sides of C. So what I'll do is I'll go in and I'll get an idea about how wide is that middle finger, and I'll come down here and I'll just eyeball split it in half. Now, when we move into guideline for D, this is going to head back up to this original knuckle. So go ahead and do this with me now. What I want to do is I want to erase A. And we're going to call this D, D, D. And you're going to come up here and you're going to aim for this. For now, as a beginner, go ahead and do this with a straight edge. And later on, you'll just freehand this. But this will be the top edge for the middle finger. Then measuring from this knuckle down to the pivot point, we want the same distance coming down to here, and that's also D. This will connect back to the middle finger fingertips. The next thing we want to do is we want to round off the fingertips for the profile middle finger hand. And this is going to start aiming back towards the middle of the hand. Where do you aim for is determined by this distance right here. So when you measure from the knuckle down to that pivot point, then you should move from the pivot point down further into space. And this will let you know how wide that middle finger is back here at arc A. At this point, I also want to make sure that my middle finger does not start to look too wide in proportion to this hand. So when I look at this middle finger right now, I feel like it's getting a little bit too wide. So what I'll do is I'll lightly erase what I've just drawn, so then I can come back in and draw a little bit of a thinner middle finger, following close to the line that I just previously drew, and I felt that that was too thick. So now I have a more slim middle finger. But again, you want to aim for the same distance here. So this is wider at the pivot point and narrow at the fingertips. So now just take a look again. Here we can see this is our pointer finger and this is our new middle finger. At this stage we can come in and erase the older middle finger. So that would be this top edge right here and the fingertips. Always remember that your pointer finger will not go all the way out to guideline C. only the middle finger makes the full distance. E is going to be her ring finger. So we want to come down from the middle finger, find a location for E, connect a straight line back to that pivot point B. Now we have our pointer finger in place and our middle finger. The next one is to have the ring finger dropping down, and we're going to call this E. So moving down the curve here, let's find another location, and we'll go straight back to the pivot point. And this is going to be our ring finger. And this will also aim for that pivot point. So this finger, your pointer, your middle, and your ring finger will all come out of this pivot point B. Then we want to make sure that the ring finger width is smaller than the middle finger and evenly spaced on this E guideline. Now we want to have the ring finger shorter than the middle finger. So if this is the guideline that the middle finger would hit, we want to make sure that we are shorter. And then we also want to have an even space on both sides for the fingertip, and we want to make sure it's smaller than the middle finger. So if you want, you could take a measurement of the middle finger, come down in here, and make sure that you're doing something a little bit smaller. Then we want to have this finger taper to be wider as it travels back towards the pivot point B, and also here we want it to be evenly spaced from the pivot point location. So we can come back into here. Whatever the distance is of the ring finger here down to the pivot point, we want to do the same thing from the pivot point going down into empty space and connect that back to the ring finger, bottom of the finger. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to erase some of this so it's easy for you to see in the video. If you know exactly where you're at with your fingers, you don't have to erase it at this point. But I'll show you here. So I'm going to start to erase all of this middle finger and ring finger that's going behind the pointer. This way it's easy for you to still see, here's the pointer finger, here's the middle finger, and here's the ring finger. Now, a very common mistake that I see quite often is people will forget that the middle finger is also part of this knuckle right here. So if you come down here and label this D, this is the knuckle that comes all the way back to the middle finger. And you want to make sure that that is one continuous connection all the way through. A common mistake I'll see is someone will draw the middle finger and it will be angling too high or too low to connect all the way back up to here, and it makes their middle finger look strange and they don't know why. So I'll go ahead and darken in my ring finger just a little bit. And I'm keeping things fairly light and a little bit robotic and squared up for now. We're going to go ahead and clean these fingers up later and make them look a little more feminine. So let's label this E, and right here, this is E and E. The last finger is going to be the pinky finger. The pinky finger does not aim back to the pivot point because it will move separate from that. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to establish a guideline for F, which is basically just moving down from that guideline E and going parallel with it. We'll label that F. And then again, you want the thickness of the pinky finger to be thinner than the ring finger. And then this will taper to be larger inside the hand and smaller at the fingertips. Again, these three fingers all go back to that original pivot point. But the pinky finger, it will not go back to this pivot point. It will work independent from those three other fingers. So the easiest thing to do with the pinky finger is you know that you want it to drop down from the ring finger. and you know you want it to taper. So if we were to come in here and just draw a light line and label this F, and then you know that the pinky finger will be shorter than the ring finger, and it's going to drop down a little bit lower. And it won't quite be as thick as the ring finger. So you could check the thickness of the ring finger versus the thickness of the pinky. And then you can see here, what I'll do is I'll erase this letter E, and I'll start to draw what will be the top of the pinky finger. And here you can see the pinky finger will be aiming, and it's going behind these fingers, so it's hidden inside of there. But it's tapering to the point, and this is also tapering to the point. A lot of times when you look at Disney cartoons or anime, you'll notice that when they draw a character's hands, sometimes they'll just have two fingers stuck together, and they'll basically be drawing one group of fingers plus two individual fingers and a thumb. So in this instance, what I have here is we've got an individual pointer finger, we have an individual middle finger, and then it just feels like the pinky and the ring finger are together, almost like one finger together, but they still have the same equal widths for the small, medium, and large sizes. So again, we would have small, medium, large, and back to medium. Now here you can see, so we have the pointer finger, the middle finger, the ring finger, and the pointer, and the pinky finger. What I'm going to do is, on my drawing, I still have a lot of pencil marks here, and I want to start darkening in the fingers so we can see them a lot more clearly, and also start to erase some of this extra information. Something else that I want to do is, this hand, because we started with the fully open profile view, this hand is a little bit uncomfortable because her hand is so far open. Something that you'll notice is, as the model starts to drop her fingers down, she's going to also relax her thumb inwards. So let's go ahead and relax this thumb inwards and start to clean up the pointer finger. So here we are, this is the arc B, and this is what her thumb would follow. So if it was relaxing inwards, the thumb tip would follow along here. So let's go ahead and come into where it's closer to the pinky finger. Now, you remember, as a hand starts to close, this webbing here will start to buckle in beyond the arc A. So as we come in here and we start to make this thumb more relaxed, this webbing here is also going to buckle inwards. Now that I have the thumb starting to relax inwards, I can get rid of some of this fatty tissue down in this area as well. So what I'll do is I'll come into the original profile wrist and I'll trim away some of that extra skin right there. And this is going to help her hand to look more relaxed and less open with tension. Now what we can do is, the pointer finger that I have here feels a little bit straight and robotic. I want to kind of have it hyperflexed a little bit, having this little bit of a scoop here. And then I'm going to make it slightly more narrow so it feels a little more feminine. And also the webbing is going to cut back into here beyond arc A. Now that we have these two fingers in place, we can go ahead and start to erase all of those extra lines that we don't need anymore. But I want you to keep this pivot point B as a reminder for how you came up with the placements for these fingers. So the next priority was the middle finger coming down and the middle finger up here at the knuckle and the top of the hand. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and start to darken in. This is our profile wrist coming up to that knuckle and turning into the middle finger. And then again, as the middle finger scoops around, it'll come all the way back to the pointer finger. And don't change the shape of it because it was originally heading for here. So make sure you keep that taper. And in this instance as well, this is your chance to make the middle finger look a little more narrow, a little more dainty if you wish. And if you want to hyperflex the pointer finger, sometimes you could even hyperflex that middle finger too and have it slightly scoop outward. So that would look like this. To kind of give that dainty look, classic. Now the next finger is going to be the ring finger. The ring finger and the pinky finger. For this hand right here, let's just keep things really simple and just have them just be straight, straight, and we're done. We'll also have them where they feel like they're kind of clumped together. So what I'll do is I'll come down here. Here's my ring finger coming out to the fingernail. I'll scoop the underside. I'm making sure not to change the shaping, so this was originally heading for that side of the pivot point. This was originally heading for that side of the pivot point. So make sure you do not change that. And then the pinky finger, I'll just draw a little bit of a fingernail, done, scoop the underside, and aim back for this webbing area here where it will just disappear behind that. So now you can more clearly see the different fingers. I'm going to go ahead and erase these guidelines. So it's easier for you to see in the video. To finish this off, what I'll do is a few fingernails. Let's go ahead and start with the thumb. So again, we're still drawing kind of this thumb profile view. As her hand starts to rotate to profile and these fingers drop down, this thumb also starts to come out towards the camera more. So you're going to start seeing more of her thumbnail. So in this instance, when I draw this thumbnail, I'll start to show you more of that thumbnail. So again, here's the thumbnail I was doing on a profile view, and I was just doing a profile thumb with a profile fingernail. Now I'm almost starting to show that thumb rolling outwards, so you're seeing like a 3/4 view of the thumbnail. For the pointer and middle fingers, what I want to do is I'll draw the middle finger one first, and then I know to make the pointer one a little bit smaller looking. Now these two fingers that are clumped together, the ring finger and pinky finger, you really don't need any fingernails at all. If you were to do anything, you could do a little tiny one on the ring finger, and for the pinky, nothing at all. So go ahead and finish yours up to this point, and then we're going to work on the second view over here. As we look at these two hands, you're going to notice that this one looks and feels like it's smaller than this one. The reason is because this hand is filling in the complete guideline area. So this would be a maximum hand. This one here is starting to trim away from the thumb, as well as making the fingers look a little bit smaller and lighter, more dainty. But if you notice, the wrist stayed at the same place. The middle finger still goes the full distance. The thumb still goes to the full distance. And these other fingers are stair-stepping down from the middle finger. So really, nothing has changed for the size and proportion of this compared to your model. So even though this looks bigger, they're actually still both at the exact same scale. What we're going to do now is we're going to do another elegant hand dropping down. But in this instance, what I want to do is I want to introduce a second knuckle bend, because you're going to see this quite often where your model will have her pointer finger straight, her thumb relaxed, and then this middle finger will have a bend, and the two other fingers below it will also have a bend as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to keep the pointer finger where it is. The next finger that would be in front of everything is going to be your thumb. So do this with me now. What we'll do is we'll bring our thumb up into this area. So basically, if you were to kind of split this lower half in half, and we would have a thumb that's coming out of this area. Once you've drawn it in there, just double check that you're not making your thumb thicker than the original thumb. And also keep in mind that the webbing now will cut in beyond arc A. So here I have arc A, and the webbing is going inside of that. If you feel like your thumb looks pretty good, go ahead and start to erase the previous thumb. And notice down here, again, at the fatty part of the thumb, I'm trimming some of that away as well, because I want this to look a little more like it's a hand rotating up and you're seeing less and less of that tissue. Now, as her hand is rotating up, you're going to see more and more of the thumb. So at this point, we're no longer going to have a profile thumb. We're going to have an actual thumb. So let's do the adjustment for that now. Now, for you to practice this for the first time, what I want you to do is go ahead and trace off that profile wrist, as well as the guidelines for arc A, arc B, and arc C, and label this CBA, and of course B and C where they meet at the thumb, and A. And then trace off that new thumb that you've put on your hand. And we're going to learn now how to make this into a flat view thumb. Now what we're going to do is, as your thumb rotates out, you're going to notice this knuckle here becomes very predominant. You'll also notice that your thumb is wider here, and then it gets narrow here as well as narrow there. And so what we're going to call this is a diamond. It's going to be small here, bigger there, and small there. So for instance, on the other side of your paper, go ahead and draw a square. And then draw a square that is sideways, so the tips are at the top. And there you have your diamond. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take this diamond and we're going to squish it even longer. So it's no longer a square. It's going to be a long squished diamond. So draw these three right now. So on this side, what we're looking for is a diamond heading in this direction with that thumb knuckle being the middle part of the diamond. Where it's going to be is here in between B and A, and at the center of the thumb. So what you can do is you can come back here, find the center of this. This was the profile wrist. Make sure you're using that new profile wrist, not the original wrist from the layout. Find the center of that, the middle of the thumb. And draw a line all the way out to C. And now what we can do is we can have an even amount on this side from here to here, and then an even amount on this side. And that's going to be the beginnings of your diamond shape. Then we can connect this all the way back to guideline C here, and all the way back to guideline C there. And then we'll also taper this all the way back to your wrist. It's the center of the wrist. And now we'll have a sense of the flat thumb view. So go ahead and lightly erase the thumb tip, but knowing where your webbing was and knowing where the fatty part of your thumb is. And we can turn this now into a rounded tip, but you're tapering wide here and narrow here. And then you want to taper back inwards before you come to the webbing, and taper inwards before you go back out to your palm. So now we're starting to develop this diamond shape for the thumb flattening out. Now take a look back at the flat hand view. If you recall, the pointer finger is flat and we're seeing the whole entire fingernail. And this is where we were using the J shape to do the fingernail. So we want to do the same thing here for the thumb. So again, it's going to be this J shape. So I'll just do a little bit here, turn the corner, and go back. Now usually when girls have their nails done, the thumbnail is pretty much your biggest of all of your nails. So at this point I would go ahead and square this off with a slightly rounded square, and then erase the rounded thumb tip. So you have a feeling of the soft skin is rounded and the thumbnail is square. Now let's do this again back here on our elegant hand. So if you want to follow me, I'll go through this quickly and then you can do it yourself. So again, here's arch A from here to here, B, B and C, and arch C. And somewhere in between arches A and B, we want to find this center point, which is the widest part of the diamond. And we also want to know how wide is the thumb. Then we're going to go back to the profile hand, split it in half, go through the middle of the thumb, all the way to guideline C, And now we can have the widest part of the thumb come to here and here. So what I'll do is I'll erase this older profile thumb. So I can go from here back to C, from here back to C. Wide here and narrow here. And you want to taper back inwards before you come to lighting, and taper inwards before you go back out too. Okay, so I'll just do a little here, turn the corner, and go back. Square this off with a slightly rounded square, and then erase the rounded thumb tip. So you have the feeling that the soft skin is rounded and the thumbnail is square. Now before I start rotating the middle finger to come downwards, we want to have this pivot point. So go ahead and go back and find that pivot point B. I also want to make sure that the wrist width is well represented inside of here. Now in this instance, what I'm going to do is, originally the middle finger is aiming towards the middle finger knuckle. But as I rotate the hand more flat and I bring the thumb out for a flat view of the thumb, this knuckle will be about the same height as the pointer finger knuckle. So now that wrist width from here needs to start from the pointer finger and head downwards. So come back here to your new profile wrist width, and we're going to start now from the knuckle at the pointer finger. So I'm going to take that new wrist width, top of the knuckle at the pointer, and I'm going to come down here. So now I can see that as my hand is rotating, and I still need to keep that same width, that this pointer finger will now start to aim down towards that. Now what we're going to do is, let's go ahead and establish the middle finger. And let's start with the same thing we did over here. So following along the C guideline, come down to about here, somewhere around the center of the hand, and aim back for that original pivot point. And then we know that the middle finger will be evenly spaced, heading back. What I want to do is, if you recall, as we were closing the grasping hand, your knuckles will start to have a second bend right here. And what we did was we went from B to B and A. And we had this second guideline that was similar to B and C. And remember, we had our knuckle bends right inside there. So I want to do something very similar to that here with this middle finger. So come back here to the arc B and have that come back to arc A, going behind her fingers, and label this B and A. And then here we'll do another pivot point. So we're going to go from pivot point B heading out to this arc B, and then we're going to move this down a little bit more. So again, this is the center of the middle finger with a little pivot point right here, and we'll label this C, and we'll go ahead and erase the previous one. And now what's going to happen is the original width of your middle finger up here, we still need to divide it right here on the hand. But as it's tapering towards this first pivot point, it's going to get out to here and underneath as well. But then it will need to pivot and taper back towards the original knuckle. And here is pivoting and tapering, so it's evenly spaced on both sides of pivot point B. Now out here at arc A, you're barely going to see any knuckle at all, and it just depends on how much you're rotating her hand if this center middle knuckle disappears completely. As a beginning student, I would still show it a little bit, so then you don't have to worry about starting to draw the underside of her palm, because the more you rotate this out, the more you now start having to draw this extra information here. So let's keep it where we still see two bumps at the top. So I'm going to erase A here, and this will be D, 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 and you can see this is the middle finger here that's connecting back to the knuckle bend of the middle finger at this arc B, and then that's connecting back to the new C location because that middle finger is slightly bending. Now her ring finger and pointer finger, you can see that since the thumb is here, we're going to have to put these in lightly, and then eventually the thumb will be slightly in front of them. So let's go back to E for the ring finger. And at first I'm going to draw it really close along with the middle finger, knowing that I want to take this new knuckle pivot point, and then I can have my, so if this was E here, I can have a new E location dropping down here. Erase that. And then remembering that the width of the ring finger, same as here, similar to the pointer, is going to be shorter than the middle finger, and it's going to have this pivot point right here. Again, this part is aiming back for this side of the pivot point. This part is aiming for that side. It should be evenly spaced. So I'm noticing that I need to trim away a little bit here. Now, for the sake of you being able to see what I'm doing, I'm going to start to erase. This was the old middle finger. And then this is the middle finger going behind the pointer. And the guidelines for the ring finger. So now you should be able to see a little bit better. The last one is going to be the pinky finger. Again, I want to do the same thing where these two fingers are clumped together and they feel like they're kind of just one unit. Over here I made a little tiny space between them so you could see the straight edge of the thumbnail. At this point I'm just going to have them completely together, so the pinky, you don't see a straight edge, thumbnail, or anything. All I need to know is that the pinky finger is shorter than the ring finger. It's going to head back for this pivot point, and then it's going to head back into the hand. Now that you've got to this stage, if you want to, go ahead and take a minute to clean this up just a little bit further. Making sure that you keep this B pivot point and your knuckle for the ring finger is separate from the knuckle for the middle finger. And then let's go ahead and add a fingernail here for the pointer, a profile fingernail here for the middle finger, remembering that it's a little bit bigger than the pointer, and then a small fingernail here for the ring finger, and the pinky is completely hidden behind there. Now the reason why this works is because of this new B guideline that's heading back towards B and A, and you have your knuckle bends following along with that. So now that I take a look at my two hands side by side, I can see here that this middle finger and the pointer finger, they look just a little bit too thick for me. So if I want to thin out this middle finger, I have to remember that I'm aiming back for where this B arc connected back to B and A. So then if I'm going to thin out part of this underside, I'm aiming back for that first before it starts to head to the opposite side of this pivot point. So I could curve it in, thin it out, fix my ring finger. And then the top edge, if I want to thin that out, again I'm aiming for this arc and I'm tapering to a smaller fingertip. And if I feel like my pointer, it just barely feels a little bit thick, so I'm going to trim some away from this curved side here. So I'll come in back to the webbing, trim some of that away, and then I'll finish by getting my middle finger back in there. And at this stage, that's pretty good for your first try. And as you draw this hand more and more often, you'll get better at it. And you'll start to notice that having these guidelines in here just faintly, and you're able to just quickly place the fingers right where they go, especially when we move into the smaller scale. When we start doing our hands in the very small scale like this, you're going to see that sometimes you don't even bother to have that second knuckle bend. Here's a view also where the fingers are going behind the pointer finger, behind the pointer finger. There's some other views here where the thumb is touching the pointer finger and then all these fingers are just hanging behind there. And something like this where she brought her wrist downwards to bring her fingers out. So there's several variations of doing this elegant hand. Now that you've completed this demo for the elegant view, I want you to scan and submit this to me as part of your notes, as well as the original diamond thumb that we traced off of here and we did a practice one. And make sure that your guidelines are still in here. So if you had to erase some of it, go back in here and get this diamond shape so I can see that you understood this correctly, as well as drawing your thumb inside of that. And then for the homework, you're going to do pages 5 and 6. Basically, you look at the drawing right here, you're going to do the exact same drawing here, but all you're putting in here is a thumb, pointer, and middle finger, plus all of the labeling, all the D's and C's. And then when you move on to the second one, you're going to introduce the ring finger. But what you need to do is you need to draw the whole hand again, including the pointer, middle, thumb, and now introducing the ring finger, plus all of the ring finger markings. The last one is going to be for F. This is the pinky finger right here. So again, you'll draw the whole hand and now including the pinky finger, and at this point I'll be able to see everything. To make this exercise simple for doing the homework, you can just leave your original profile thumb that you've already learned. If you want to, you can start working on the diamond thumb, but it is not required. In the future, though, you're going to want to get really good at being able to do this, because you're going to notice a lot of models have their thumbs actually facing out towards the camera. So this is a really popular pose that you'll see on the runways.